Hello everyone, welcome back to Talking History. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Liz and on this channel I do exactly as it's called. I talk all about history. So a little bit of disclaimer before we get going. I am not an historian. I am just someone who is extremely passionate about history and I'd like to share my passion with you. So last week's video I finished up the three-part video on Harold Godwinson and the Battle of Hastings and Stamford Bridge and all of those in between. So if you haven't seen those, I'd leave those linked either up there or down there. There'll be somewhere for you to go and find and see. And today's video is all about Edgar the Atheling. Enjoy. Edgar was born sometime between 1052 and 1056. He was born to Edward the Exile and his wife Agatha, whose origins are uncertain. He had two older sisters, who was Margaret and Christine. Margaret would go on to marry King Malcolm III of Scotland and would later become Saint Margaret of Scotland when she was canonised in 1250. And Christine entered Romsey Abbey, where she remained her whole life, and she tutored her two nieces, Edith and Mary. So Edgar's father, Edward, was the eldest son born to Edmund Ironside, and Edward and his younger brother Edmund would be sent into exile on the continent by the new King of England, King Canute. Edmund had died sometime between 1046 and 1054, having married the daughter of a Hungarian king whose name is unknown, and Edward had married Agatha in 1043. Edward and his family may have spent the rest of their lives in European exile if it weren't for King Edward the Confessor lacking an heir to the English throne. Even though he was married to Queen Edith, the couple had remained childless. And sometime in 1054, Edward had sent an embassy to find Edward the Exile and to bring him back home to England as the heir to the throne. Edward was found, but the family didn't travel immediately, possibly because Agatha was pregnant with Edgar at the time. And it wouldn't be until 1057 that another embassy, this time led by Harold Godwinson, would bring Edward the Exile back home to England. And the family finally arrived back in England in April 1057. On April the 19th in 1057, just days after their return to England, Edward the Exile died suddenly and unexpectedly. His cause of death is unknown, it's uncertain. It's possibly it was natural causes, or it could have been suspicious. We don't know. But either way, this must have been a blow for King Edward the Confessor. He hadn't even had the opportunity to meet his nephew. So Edward's son Edgar, who was now the Atheling, was far too young to assume the political role, and Edgar's sisters and mother were under the protection of King Edward and Queen Edith. Agatha just completely disappeared from any record. There's no further mention of her at all. Edgar was given into the custody of Queen Edith, and his sisters were sent to the royal convent at Wilton to continue their education. When Edward the Confessor died in January 1066, Edgar would have been as young as 10, possibly no older than 14, but due to his young age, he would be passed over as candidate for the throne in preference for the older and much more experienced Harold Godwinson. Following King Harold's death at the Battle of Hastings in October 1066, Edgar was proclaimed as king in London by some of his supporters, but Edgar would have been incapable of mounting any real challenge to William the Conqueror and his army. So Edgar had no option but to surrender to William the Conqueror. In 1068, Edgar had become unsettled under the new Norman rule, and he joined the opposition to the new regime, which had been festering in northern England. And William's ruthless response was the harrying of the north. Edgar had fled with his life. He and his sisters made their way to Scotland. Edgar and his sisters were warmly welcomed at Dunfermline by the King of Scotland, Malcolm III, and in 1069 Malcolm had asked Edgar for his sister's hand in marriage for Margaret's hand. And Margaret was reluctant at first, but with pressure from Malcolm and her brother, and possibly her own sense of obligation to the king who had sheltered her and her family, Margaret accepted his proposal and they married in 1070. And by all accounts, it seems that they had a happy and successful marriage and partnership. In 1069, the Northumbrians had rose again against William's rule, and Edgar returned to England, where he became the leader of the revolt. And after some success, the rebels were to be defeated by William again at York. Edgar fled again back to Scotland, and in late summer of 1069, King Sweyn Estridsson of Denmark, who was also the cousin of the late King Harold Godwinson, had sent a fleet of ships to England, triggering a fresh wave of uprisings. Edgar sailed to the Humber, where he joined forces with the Northumbrian rebels, but after leading a small and unsuccessful seaborne raid into Lindsey, he fled with a few supporters to rejoin the main army, and William occupied York later in that year, and he laid waste to the surrounding countryside. And in early 1070, he moved against Edgar and the other English leaders who had taken refuge with the remaining followers in a marshy region, possibly Holderness, where he forced them to fight. Edgar once again returned to the safety of Scotland, where he remained until 1052, when William invaded Scotland and had forced Malcolm into submitting his overlordship, and the terms of the Treaty of Abernethy had probably included the expulsion of Edgar from Scotland. So Edgar sought refuge in Flanders, where after a short while he returned to Scotland. Edgar then received an offer from the King of France, Philip I, who was William's enemy. Philip had offered Edgar a castle and lands near the border of Normandy, where he would be able to invade Normandy. And Edgar, quite liking the sound of that, so he sailed for France, but he was shipwrecked on the coast of England by a violent storm. Edgar had managed to escape to the safety of Scotland once again, and this time his brother-in-law Malcolm had persuaded him to make peace with William the Conqueror, and he returned to England as his subject. And in 1081, Edgar had accompanied King William to an expedition through South Wales. William the Conqueror had died in 1087, and he was succeeded by his second son, William Rufus. Edgar had attended his coronation, but he actually supported William's older brother, Robert Curthose, who was the Duke of Normandy. in his dispute with his brother William II. But William had defeated his brother in 1091 and a settlement was agreed between the two brothers. And Edgar was deprived of his lands in Normandy, so once again he returned to Scotland, where his brother-in-law Malcolm was now preparing for war with William I. William II, sorry. William had marched north to meet King Malcolm of Scotland, and the negotiations were conducted by Edgar on the behalf of Malcolm III and the newly reconciled Robert Curthose on the behalf of William II. Edgar returned to Scotland in 1093, this time on a diplomatic mission for William to negotiate with Malcolm III. Malcolm was dissatisfied with the William's failure to implement the full terms of the treaty in 1091, and this dispute led to war. Malcolm invaded Northumbria and he was killed along with his eldest son by Margaret, Edward, in the Battle of Alnwick. Malcolm's brother Donald Bain had quickly took the Scottish throne, forcing out the English and the French retainers who were introduced by Malcolm. Donald Bain was in conflict with William II, whose influence in Scotland had diminished. William joined forces with Duncan, who was Donald's nephew, Malcolm's eldest son, born to his first wife. Duncan had spent years as an hostage in the English court, and William aided Duncan to overthrow his uncle, but he was unsuccessful, and as Donald regained the throne and Duncan was killed, Edgar was given command of an English army by William II in 1097, and he marched into Scotland. He ousted Donald Bain, and Edgar had his nephew, also called Edgar, the now eldest surviving son of Margaret and Malcolm, placed on the throne of Scotland. Robert Curthose had mortgaged his Norman estates to his brother in return for money to be able to participate in the First Crusade to Jerusalem. Edgar had asked to accompany him, and they crossed the bleak Anatolian highlands to reach the outskirts of Antioch, north of Syria. By October 1097, they remained there until June in 1098, when the town was betrayed to the Crusaders, and it took another year before the Crusaders reached Jerusalem due to many disagreements and among their leaders, and Jerusalem was taken by storm on the 15th of July 1099. Both Duke Robert and Edgar distinguished themselves during the campaign. With a win, a new Christian kingdom was established. Robert's chaplain, Amulf, had became its patriarch. On their return journey from Jerusalem, Edgar was given rich gifts, and by both Byzantine and the German emperors, who both had offered him an honoured place at court, but Edgar declined instead. He returned back home to England. Edgar once again stood by Robert Curthose, and this time against his younger brother Henry I, who had succeeded William Rufus, as King Edgar was taken prisoner after the Battle of Tinchebray, I think that's how it's pronounced, in 1106. Robert was imprisoned by his brother for the remainder of his life. Edgar was taken back to England and he was pardoned by King Henry I. Edgar's eldest niece, Edith of Scotland, who had adopted the name Matilda, who was the eldest daughter of Margaret and King Malcolm of Scotland, married Henry I in 1100. Edgar the Atheling retired from court. He lived quietly in the Hampshire and Sussex border. Edgar died early in 1125. There is no evidence if Edgar had married or had any children, although there were two mysterious references to an Edgar Atheling that were found in the Northumbrian records in the years 1158 and 1167. There we are. That's Edgar the Atheling. I quite like that actually. I like this family tree going down. Though, like I said, that's still in the Anglo-Saxon period. Well, it's not technically the Anglo-Saxon period, it's the Norman period, but he's still an Anglo-Saxon. And I'm going to do one more video next week, which it's going to be on Margaret of Wessex, or Saint Margaret of Scotland, and that will be released next week. So please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss that one and any future videos that will be coming up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And hello to all my new subscribers. I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying the channel, the videos. And I'm going to go. So I will see you all next week. Look after yourselves. Take care. And I'll see you soon. Bye.